Australia's First Fleet. Captain Arthur Phillip and the First Fleet arrived at Botany Bay between the 18th and 20th of January 1788. However, this area was deemed to be unsuitable for the settlement and they moved north to Port Jackson on the 26th of January 1788, landing at Camp Cove. Governor Phillip carried instructions to establish the first British colony in Australia. However, the First Fleet was underprepared for the task and the soil around Sydney Cove was poor. The young colony relied upon both the development of farms around Parramatta and also trading food with local Aboriginal clans. The Second Fleet's arrival in 1790 provided desperately needed food and supplies, but the newly arrived convicts were too ill to be useful to the colony. The Second Fleet became known as the Death Fleet because 278 of the convicts and crew died on the voyage to Australia, compared to only 48 in the First Fleet. Colonisation. In the winter of 1791, the process of British colonisation of Western Australia began when George Vancouver claimed the Albany region in the name of King George III. In the summer of 1801, Matthew Flinders was welcomed by the Noongar people upon his arrival aboard the Investigator, and various items were exchanged. Initially, relations between the explorers and the Aboriginal people were generally hospitable and based on understanding the terms of trading for food, water, axes, cloth, and artefacts, a relationship encouraged by Governor Phillip. However, these relations became hostile as the Aboriginals realised that the land and resources upon which they depended and the order of their life were seriously disrupted by the ongoing presence of the colonisers. Between 1790 and 1810, Aboriginal tribes in the Sydney area undertook a campaign of resistance against the English colonisers in a series of attacks. Law and land. From 1788 until 1823, the colony of New South Wales was a penal colony. This meant that there were mainly convicts, Marines, and the wives of Marines, although free settlers started to arrive in 1793. In 1823, the British government established a New South Wales Parliament by setting up a Legislative Council as well as a Supreme Court under the New South Wales Act 1823. This Act is now seen as a first step towards a responsible Parliament in Australia. It was also intended to establish English law in the colony with the establishment of New South Wales criminal and civil courts. Land ownership. The question of land ownership by Indigenous people was not dealt with by the colonisers until the mid-1830s. In 1835, John Batman signed 2 treaties, or agreements, with Kulin people to purchase 600,000 acres of land between what is now considered Melbourne and Bellarine Peninsula. In response to these treaties and other arrangements between free settlers and Indigenous habitants, such as around Camden, the New South Wales Governor, Sir Richard Bourke, issued a proclamation. Bourke's proclamation established the notion that the land belonged to no one prior to the British Crown taking possession. To effectively override the legitimacy of these treaties, the British Colonial Office felt the need to issue another proclamation. The Colonial Office proclamation stated that people found in possession of land without the authority of the government would be considered trespassers. This was despite and because many other people, including a report to the House of Commons in 1837, recognised that Aboriginal occupants had rights in lands. Nevertheless, the law in New South Wales variously applied the principles expressed in Bourke's proclamation. This would not change until the Australian High Court's decision in the Mabo case in 1992.